The asphalt was cold beneath me as I sat on the sidewalk, staring blankly at the empty parking spot where my car had been. My breath came in shallow gasps, a mixture of pain and disbelief constricting my chest. It had happened so fast, two men in masks jumping me as I stepped out of the gas station. One pinned me against the car, the other rifled through my pockets. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," one of them growled, his grip tightening on my jacket. I froze, the fight draining out of me as I realized how quickly things could go from bad to worse. In less than a minute, they'd taken everything: my wallet, my phone, my keys, and my car. I don't know how long I sat there after they drove off, the sound of tires screeching fading into the night. People walked by, some glancing at me with curiosity, others avoiding my gaze entirely. No one stopped to help. Finally, I pulled myself up, wincing as pain shot through my ribs. My feet felt heavy as I started walking, the glow of the gas station receding behind me. The 6-mile trek home felt like an eternity. My thoughts raced, bouncing between anger and humiliation. How had I let this happen? By the time I reached my neighborhood, my legs were numb, and my hands were trembling with exhaustion. I didn't bother knocking when I got to the front door. I had no keys, no way to announce myself. I pounded on the wood, my fists hitting harder than I intended. A moment later, the door swung open, and Amanda stood there, her eyes wide with shock. "Jason," she exclaimed, reaching for me. "What happened?" "I got robbed," I said, pushing past her and collapsing onto the couch. Her hands flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, are you okay? Did they hurt you?" "I'm fine," I muttered, though my ribs throbbed with every breath. "Just tired." Amanda's concern felt genuine, but as the minutes passed, something about her demeanor struck me as odd. She hovered, asking if I needed anything, but her energy seemed off, almost rehearsed. "Do you want me to call the police?" she asked, her phone already in her hand. "No point," I said bitterly. "They're long gone." She hesitated, then nodded, her fingers typing quickly before she set the phone down. "Did you see their faces?" she asked, sitting beside me. "No," I said. "They wore masks. They knew what they were doing." Her brow furrowed, and for a moment, she seemed lost in thought. Then she reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. "I'm so sorry, Jason," she said softly. "We'll figure this out." Her words should have been comforting, but they didn't feel real. After a shower to wash off the grime of the night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Amanda was beside me, scrolling through her phone, the glow of the screen illuminating her face. "Who are you texting?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. She glanced at me, her expression unreadable. "Just work stuff." Her answer seemed plausible, but it gnawed at me anyway. I wanted to believe her, but the little flicker of doubt in my chest wouldn't go away. As Amanda's breathing evened out beside me, I stayed awake, replaying the night over and over in my mind. The robbery had shaken me, but the unease I felt now went deeper than that. Something was wrong, and I didn't know if it was the men who'd taken everything from me, or the woman lying next to me. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, sharp and unwelcome. My body ached from the night before, the bruises on my ribs flaring every time I moved. Amanda was already up, bustling around the kitchen as the smell of coffee drifted into the air. "Good morning," she said brightly as I shuffled into the room. "Morning," I replied, my voice groggy. I dropped into a chair at the dining table, wincing as the movement pulled at my side. Amanda set a plate in front of me, eggs, bacon, and toast, arranged with a care that seemed unusual. "You made breakfast?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. She smiled, sliding into the chair across from me. "I figured you deserved something nice after what you've been through." Her tone was sweet, almost too sweet, and it set my teeth on edge. Amanda didn't cook. Ever. I poked at the eggs with my fork, watching her carefully. She seemed calm, cheerful even, but there was something beneath the surface I couldn't quite place. "How are you feeling?" she asked, leaning forward. "I'm fine," I said, my words clipped. "Sore but fine." She nodded, her fingers tapping lightly on the edge of the table. "Do you want to talk about it?" "No," I said quickly. "There's nothing to talk about. It happened. I'm moving on." Amanda's eyes darted away, and she nodded again, a little too quickly. As I left the house for work, driving a borrowed car that only added to my frustration, I couldn't shake the feeling that Amanda was hiding something. Her concern felt genuine, but her demeanor was off. She was too attentive, too accommodating. Amanda was never one to dote on me, not because she didn't care, but because that wasn't her style. She was independent, self-assured, and had little patience for coddling. But now, she was practically hovering. By the time I got to the office, the unease had settled deep in my chest. My co-workers offered their condolences when they heard about the robbery, but their sympathy only irritated me. "You all right, man?" my colleague Brandon asked, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just ready to move past it." Brandon nodded, but his gaze lingered for a moment, like he wasn't sure he believed me. The day dragged on, every task feeling like an uphill battle. I kept replaying Amanda's behavior in my mind, searching for some explanation that made sense. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe the robbery had rattled me more than I realized, and I was projecting my anxiety onto her. But as I drove home, the doubt only grew. When I walked through the door that evening, Amanda was on the couch, her legs tucked beneath her as she scrolled through her phone. She looked up and smiled, her expression warm. "Hey," she said. "How was your day?" "Fine," I replied, setting my bag down. She patted the cushion beside her, motioning for me to sit. I hesitated for a moment before joining her, my body tense. "How about you?" I asked, watching her carefully. "Busy day?" "Yeah," she said, her eyes flicking back to her phone. "Lots of planning for next week's event." Her voice was casual, but her posture was stiff. As we sat in silence, the glow of her phone screen caught my attention. Her fingers moved quickly, typing something I couldn't see. "Who are you texting?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Just work stuff," she said, her voice breezy. "Must be important," I said, leaning slightly closer. She shifted, turning the phone away from me. "Yeah, we're ironing out the details for a client's party. It's nothing exciting." Her smile seemed forced, and the knot in my chest tightened. That night, as Amanda slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The robbery had shaken me, but this was different. Amanda was hiding something, and I was going to find out what. The unease was relentless, a dull ache in the back of my mind that refused to go away. Every time Amanda glanced at her phone, every time her fingers flew across the screen, the knot in my chest tightened. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to grab the phone and demand answers. But the part of me that feared what I might find held me back. Instead, I called the one person I trusted more than anyone else, my best friend, Ryan. "Man, I heard about what happened," Ryan said, his voice laced with concern. "Are you okay?" "I've been better," I admitted, pacing the living room. "They took everything, Ryan. My wallet, my phone, my car. It's like they ripped my life out from under me." Ryan let out a low whistle. "That's brutal, dude. Did you report it?" "Yeah, but the cops didn't seem optimistic. The car's probably chopped for parts by now." "Damn," Ryan said. "Let me take you out for a drink or something. You could use it." "Maybe later," I said, glancing toward the kitchen where Amanda was preparing dinner. "I've got some stuff to sort out first." "All right, but don't disappear on me," Ryan said. "I'm here if you need anything." "Thanks, man," I said, ending the call. As I set my phone down, Amanda walked into the room, wiping her hands on a towel. "Who was that?" she asked, her tone light. "Ryan," I replied. "Just checking in." She nodded, but her gaze lingered on me for a moment longer than usual. "You should go out with him," she said after a beat. "It might be good for you to get out of the house." Her suggestion caught me off guard. Amanda wasn't usually one to encourage me to spend time away from her. "Maybe," I said cautiously. "We'll see." As she turned back toward the kitchen, I couldn't help but notice the way she glanced at her phone on the counter, her fingers hesitating before picking it up. The unease twisted deeper. The next day, I went to work with a sense of dread I couldn't shake. Ryan called again during my lunch break, his tone more upbeat this time. "Jason, you gotta let me distract you for a bit," he said. "Let's hit the Copper Pint tonight. First round's on me." I hesitated, weighing his offer. "Come on, man," Ryan said, laughing. "You sound like you're about to lose it. A couple of beers, some bad jokes. It'll do you good." Finally, I relented. "All right, I'll meet you there at 7. That evening, as I left the house, Amanda was sitting on the couch, her phone in her lap. "Heading out?" she asked, looking up. "Yeah," I said, "meeting Ryan for a drink." "Have fun," she said, her smile warm. As I walked out the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that her warmth was calculated. At the Copper Pint, Ryan greeted me with a grin and a cold beer already waiting on the table. "Good to see you out of the house," he said, clinking his glass against mine. "Thanks for dragging me out," I said, taking a sip. The conversation flowed easily at first. Old stories, jokes, and updates on life. But eventually, Ryan's tone grew more serious. "How's Amanda holding up?" he asked. "She seems fine," I said, though the words felt hollow. Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Fine? That's it." I hesitated, then sighed. "I don't know, man. She's been different lately. Distant, but also weirdly attentive. It doesn't add up." Ryan frowned, setting his beer down. "Have you talked to her about it?" "Not really," I admitted. "I don't even know what I'd say." "Hey, Amanda, why are you being too nice?" He chuckled, but his expression remained serious. "Look, I don't want to plant ideas in your head, but if something feels off, maybe it's worth paying attention to." His words stayed with me long after we left the bar. When I got home, Amanda was already in bed, her breathing steady and even. I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching her. Ryan's words echoed in my mind. If something feels off, maybe it's worth paying attention to. And something definitely felt off. The next morning, Amanda was already up by the time I dragged myself out of bed. I could hear her humming softly in the kitchen, a tune I didn't recognize. It should have been comforting, domestic even, but it only added to the strange feeling gnawing at me. As I entered the kitchen, she looked up and smiled, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. "Morning," she said brightly. "Morning," I replied, pouring myself a cup of coffee. She handed me a plate of toast and eggs without being asked, her movements efficient, almost too practiced. "You're in a good mood," I said, raising an eyebrow. "Why wouldn't I be?" she replied, sipping her coffee. Her tone was light, but there was something rehearsed about it, like she was overcompensating. The day passed in a blur of tasks at work, but my mind kept drifting back to Amanda. She had always been independent, the type to roll her eyes at overly romantic gestures and dismiss coddling. So why was she suddenly so attentive, so present? I told myself I was overthinking it, that I was letting the robbery mess with my head. But the doubts kept creeping in. That evening, I came home to find Amanda on the couch, her legs curled beneath her and her phone in her hand. She looked up as I walked in, her expression warm but cautious. "Hey," she said. "How was your day?" "Fine," I replied, setting my bag down and joining her on the couch. "You seem distracted this morning," she said, her tone casual. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, though the word felt like a lie. As we sat there, the soft glow of her phone screen caught my attention. Her fingers moved quickly, typing something, but the angle of the screen was just out of my view. "Who are you texting?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just work stuff," she said without looking up. "Work seems to keep you busy these days," I said, forcing a laugh. She glanced at me then, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You know how it is? Clients are demanding." Her tone was breezy, dismissive, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. As she set her phone down on the coffee table, I caught a glimpse of the screen. The message thread was closed, replaced by the home screen, but the rapid way she'd locked it set off alarm bells. I leaned back on the couch, keeping my expression neutral as my mind raced. Was I being paranoid? Or was there something she didn't want me to see? That night, as Amanda slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts spiraling. The robbery had shaken me, left me feeling vulnerable and on edge. Maybe that was all this was, misplaced suspicion fueled by a bruised ego. But deep down, I didn't believe that. Amanda's behavior had changed, and no matter how much I wanted to trust her, the doubt wouldn't go away. By the time the sun rose, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to jump to conclusions, but I wasn't going to ignore my gut either. If something was happening, I was going to find out. The unease had become unbearable. Every interaction with Amanda felt like a performance, her words rehearsed and her actions too precise. I tried to shake the thoughts, to convince myself I was imagining things. But then it happened. It was a Tuesday evening, one of those nights where everything felt routine. Amanda was upstairs showering while I sorted through bills at the kitchen table, the steady hum of water running in the background. Her phone, which she usually kept glued to her side, was charging on the counter. It buzzed. My eyes flicked to the screen instinctively, expecting the usual work-related notifications. Instead, a text preview lit up the screen, the words freezing me in place. Can't wait to see you again. The message disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the blank lock screen. My pulse quickened, my thoughts racing. Who was it from? What did it mean? I glanced toward the staircase, the sound of water still running upstairs. My heart pounded as I picked up the phone, my hands trembling. The screen refused to unlock. A passcode, one I didn't know, stood between me and the truth. Of course. I set the phone back down, my chest tight with frustration. Amanda had never been secretive with her phone before. We knew each other's passwords, shared photos freely. So why the change? The water upstairs stopped, and I quickly returned to my seat, pretending to sift through papers as Amanda came down the stairs, her hair wrapped in a towel. "You're still at it?" she asked, her tone light. "Yeah," I said, forcing a casual tone. "These bills aren't going to pay themselves." She smiled, walking past me to the counter where her phone was charging. I watched out of the corner of my eye as she unlocked it with ease, her fingers moving quickly as she read something. Was it the same message? "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice careful. "Yeah," she said, glancing up with a smile. "Just catching up on some emails." Another lie. The rest of the evening passed in a haze of tension. I couldn't focus on the TV show we were supposedly watching together or the idle chatter about our weekend plans. All I could think about was that text. "Can't wait to see you again." The words echoed in my mind, each repetition stabbing at my trust. That night, after Amanda had fallen asleep, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind raced with possibilities, each one darker than the last. Was it an old friend? A coworker? Or someone else? The text hadn't given me much to go on, but it was enough to confirm what I'd feared. Amanda was hiding something. And now, I had no choice but to find out what. The next day, the weight of the text hung over me like a storm cloud. Every glance Amanda gave me felt like it carried a hidden meaning. Every word she said sounded like a deflection. I needed clarity, but I knew I couldn't get it alone. So I called Ryan. We met at the diner on Main Street, the kind of place where the booze were worn but the coffee was always strong. Ryan was already seated when I arrived, a plate of pancakes in front of him. "Man, you look rough," he said as I slid into the booth. "Thanks," I muttered. "I need your help." Ryan's expression shifted, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced with concern. "What's going on?" I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. Ryan and I had been friends for years, but this felt different. He wasn't just my confidant anymore. He was Amanda's friend, too. "I think Amanda's hiding something," I said finally. Ryan's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "She's been acting strange, distant, but overly attentive at the same time. And last night, I saw a text on her phone." "What kind of text?" Ryan asked, leaning forward. "It said, 'Can't wait to see you again,'" I said, my voice low. Ryan let out a slow whistle, sitting back in the booth. "Damn. Do you know who it was from?" "No," I admitted, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "Her phone's locked, and she's been glued to it constantly. I don't even know where to start." Ryan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "All right, look, I'm not saying Amanda's up to something, but if you really think there's more going on, you might need some outside help." I raised an eyebrow. "Outside help?" "A private investigator," Ryan said, his voice careful. The suggestion caught me off guard. I'd always thought of PIs as a last resort, something reserved for soap operas and bad TV dramas. "You think it's that serious?" I asked. Ryan shrugged. "I don't know, man. But if it's eating at you this much, maybe it's worth finding out for sure." The idea rolled around in my mind for the rest of the day. Hiring someone to follow Amanda felt extreme, even invasive. But the alternative, continuing to live with a gnawing doubt, felt worse. That evening, after Amanda had gone to bed, I found myself scrolling through a list of private investigators online. One name stood out: Alan Chase, Discreet Investigations. I hesitated for a long moment, staring at the phone number on the screen. Then, with a deep breath, I dialed Chase Investigations. A calm voice answered on the second ring. I said, my voice shaky. I need help." "Go ahead," the man said, his tone professional, but not unkind. I explained the situation as succinctly as I could, leaving out the raw emotion that threatened to choke me. Alan listened patiently, asking a few clarifying questions before responding. "I can take the case," he said. But you need to understand, this might not lead to the answers you want. I just need the truth, I said firmly. All right, Alan said. Let's get started. As I hung up the phone, a wave of guilt washed over me. Hiring a private investigator felt like a betrayal of its own, a violation of the trust one was so desperate to protect. But Amanda had made the first crack, and now I had to know. The next few days passed in a blur of tension and secrecy. Alan started his surveillance immediately, texting me updates on Amanda's movements. Each ping of my phone sent a jolt through me, a mixture of dread and anticipation. Amanda, for her part, seemed unaware of my growing paranoia. She smiled easily, asked about my day, and kept her phone firmly within reach at all times. Her routine was normal until it wasn't. On the third day, Alan called me. Jason, he began, his voice calm but direct. Amanda's routine has been mostly consistent, work errands, Jim. But today, she went somewhere unusual. Where? I asked, gripping the phone tightly. A coffee shop across town, Alan said. She was there for about an hour, meeting with someone. My heart pounded. Who? I couldn't get a clear photo, but it was a man. Mid-30s, casual but polished. They seemed comfortable with each other. Comfortable how? I pressed, my voice tight. They weren't touching, but their body language was familiar, Alan said. Like they'd done this before. The rest of the day was a haze. I went through the motions at work, but my mind was stuck on the image of Amanda sitting across from another man, laughing, talking, sharing pieces of herself she hadn't shared with me in weeks. When I got home, she greeted me with her usual warmth, her smile disarming. How was your day? She asked, standing at the stove as she stirred a pot of something fragrant. Fine, I said, forcing a smile. Busy. She nodded, her attention shifting back to the stove. Over dinner, I studied her carefully, searching for cracks in her facade. She talked about work, about an upcoming event she was planning, but her words felt hollow, like she was reading from a script. Anything interesting happened today? I asked, my tone casual. Not really, she replied without hesitation. Same old stuff. Her lie stung, but I kept my expression neutral. Later that night, as she showered, I texted Alan. Jason, any idea who the guy was? Alan, not yet. I'm digging into it. Jason, keep me posted. I stared at the screen, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. The coffee shop meeting confirmed my worst fears. Amanda was keeping secrets, and someone else was involved. But who? When Amanda came to bed, she curled up beside me, her warmth both comforting and suffocating. I lay awake long after her breathing had evened out, staring at the ceiling as my mind raced. What had gone wrong? Had I missed the signs? The memories of our early years together flashed through my mind. Weekend road trips, lazy Sundays, whispered promises in the dark. Was it all a lie? The next morning, Alan called again. I followed Amanda to the same coffee shop today, he said. This time I got a better look at the guy. Who is he? I asked, my stomach twisting. I don't know yet, Alan admitted. But I'm running his photo through some databases. I'll let you know as soon as I have something. As I hung up, I felt the first stirrings of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel before, anger. Amanda had taken my trust and twisted it into something unrecognizable. And now, with every lie she told, every secret she kept, she was pushing me closer to the edge. But I wasn't going to fall. I was going to fight. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, trying to reconcile the woman I thought I knew with the one Alan's reports were slowly revealing. Amanda was a master of pretending, her smiles and laughter so convincing they made me doubt my own instincts. But the coffee shop, the man, that wasn't pretend. That evening, when I walked through the door, Amanda was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like everything was normal. Hey, she said, glancing up with a smile. How was work? Fine, I replied, shrugging off my jacket. She patted the cushion beside her, motioning for me to sit. I hesitated for a moment before joining her, the knot in my stomach tightening as I caught the faint scent of her perfume. It was the same perfume she used to wear on our date nights, the one she hadn't worn for months. What's on your mind? She asked, tilting her head as she studied me. I froze, unsure of how much to reveal. Just work stuff, I said, forcing a smile. You know how it is. She nodded, her gaze lingering on me for a moment longer than usual. "You've seemed distracted lately," she said, her voice soft. "Is everything okay?" The audacity of her question nearly made me laugh. Here she was lying to my face, and she had the nerve to act like she was worried about me. "I'm fine," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Amanda's brow furrowed, and she opened her mouth to say something, but then stopped. Instead, she reached for my hand, her touch warm and familiar. "If something's bothering you, you can tell me," she said gently. Her words cut deeper than I expected. I wanted to believe her, to let her comfort me like she always had. But I couldn't. That night, after Amanda went to bed, I sat in the living room, staring at the wall. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, and I picked it up, the screen glowing with a message from Alan. "Alan, got a name for the guy, David Marcus. No criminal record. Works in finance." Digging deeper, the name meant nothing to me, but it was a start. I texted back, "Jason, keep following him. I need to know everything." When I finally climbed into bed, Amanda stirred, her hand reaching for mine. "You're late," she murmured, her voice heavy with sleep. "Couldn't sleep?" I said, lying easily. Her grip tightened, her warmth pulling me in despite myself. For a brief moment, I let myself feel it. The connection we used to have, the love that had once seemed unshakable. But then I remembered the text, the coffee shop, the lies, and the warmth turned to ash. The next morning, Amanda was her usual cheerful self, moving through the house with ease. She kissed me on the cheek as I left for work, her lips lingering just a second too long. "Have a good day," she said, her smile radiant. I nodded, my chest tightening as I walked out the door. What kind of person could lie so easily? Later that day, Alan called with another update. "I followed David after he left the coffee shop," Alan said. "He didn't go straight home. Instead, he went to a bar downtown." "A bar?" I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. "Yeah," Alan said. "He stayed for a while, met with a couple of people, and then left. Nothing unusual, but it's worth noting. Keep watching him," I said, my voice steady. "Will do," Alan replied. As I hung up, the anger that had been simmering beneath the surface began to boil over. Amanda had built a house of lies, and I was living in it, but not for much longer. The tension in the house was becoming unbearable. Amanda moved through our daily routines with the same practiced ease, but every glance, every word between us felt like a test. Was she lying again? Or was I reading too much into her every move? I knew the truth was closing in, and so did she. One evening, after dinner, Amanda set her fork down and folded her hands on the table. Her face was pale, her lips pressed tightly together as if she were gathering her courage. "Jason," she said softly, her voice trembling. "What is it?" I asked, my pulse quickening. She hesitated, her eyes flicking down to the table before meeting mine. "There's something I need to tell you." My stomach twisted. Was this it? The moment where everything came crashing down? "All right," I said, keeping my tone steady. "I'm listening." Amanda took a deep breath, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her napkin. "I've been feeling off lately," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like I'm losing myself. I've been stressed, overwhelmed, and I didn't know how to tell you." Her words hit me like a slap. Not because they explained anything, but because they didn't. "Stressed about what?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. "Everything," she said quickly. "Work, the house, us. I've been feeling so much pressure, and I didn't want to burden you with it." Her explanation felt rehearsed, like a shield she'd prepared to deflect suspicion. "You've been hiding things from me, Amanda," I said, leaning forward. "And now you want me to believe it's just stress? That doesn't explain the coffee shop, or why you've been glued to your phone, or—" I trailed off, the weight of her lies choking the words in my throat. Amanda's face crumpled, her eyes filling with tears. "I didn't mean to shut you out," she said, her voice breaking. "I just didn't know how to talk about it." Her vulnerability disarmed me, but only for a moment. I wanted to believe her, to let her tears wash away the doubts that had been consuming me. But the memory of the text, of Alan's reports, of her locked phone, they were louder than her words. "What about the man at the coffee shop?" I asked, my voice cold. Amanda froze, her expression shifting from sorrow to alarm. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. "Don't lie to me," I said, my hands trembling with anger. "I know you've been meeting someone, Amanda." I know about the coffee shop, and I know it wasn't for work. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. It's not what you think, she said, her voice pleading. Then tell me what it is, I demanded. Because right now, all I see is you lying to my face. Her silence was deafening. That night, Amanda slept on the couch. I stayed in our bedroom, staring at the empty space beside me. Whatever Amanda was hiding, it was tearing us apart, and I wasn't sure we could recover from it. The next morning, Amanda acted like nothing had happened. She moved through the house with her usual energy, making coffee, tidying the living room, and humming softly to herself. It was infuriating. I watched her from the kitchen, my chest tightening as she glanced at her phone, smiled at whatever she saw, and set it face down on the counter. How did you sleep? She asked, glancing at me with an expression so casual it felt rehearsed. Fine, I lied, my voice flat. Her smile faltered, but only slightly. Good. I know things were tense last night. I don't want us to keep fighting. Neither do I said, though the words tasted bitter. At work, I struggled to focus. My mind kept drifting back to Amanda's behavior, the carefully curated version of herself she presented to me every day. She was hiding something. I was sure of it. Alan's call came late that afternoon. Jason, he said, his tone brisk. I've got more on David Marcus. Let's hear it, I said, gripping the phone tightly. He's clean, no criminal record, no financial issues. He's married, 2 kids, works at a mid-level finance firm. But there's one thing that stood out. What? I asked, my pulse quickening. His wife, Alan said. She filed for separation 6 months ago. Cited irreconcilable differences and lack of trust. The words hit me like a punch. Lack of trust. I repeated. What does that mean? Could mean a lot of things, Alan said. But it's a red flag. I'm keeping tabs on him. If there's a connection between him and Amanda, I'll find it. When I got home, Amanda was in the kitchen, her back to me as she chopped vegetables for dinner. She looked so normal, so ordinary, that for a moment I wondered if I was imagining everything. But then she glanced at her phone on the counter, her expression flickering with something I couldn't quite place. Hey, she said, her voice cheerful. How was your day? Busy, I replied, watching her carefully. She nodded, her focus shifting back to the cutting board. As we sat down to eat, I decided to test the waters. Did you hear from anyone today? I asked casually, spearing a piece of chicken with my fork. Amanda hesitated, just for a second. Just work stuff, she said, smiling. Why? Just curious, I said, keeping my tone light. Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes flicked to her phone, which sat face down on the table beside her. That night, after Amanda had gone to bed, I sat in the darkened living room, my thoughts churning. Alan's words echoed in my mind. If there's a connection between him and Amanda, I'll find it. I wanted to believe that Amanda was innocent, that her lies were small and insignificant. But the evidence was stacking up, and it was pointing in one direction. Amanda wasn't just hiding something. She was hiding someone, and I wasn't going to stop until I knew who. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of determination. The gaps in Amanda's story were growing too large to ignore, and the mounting evidence pointed to something much darker than just stress or overwork. As I sipped my coffee, Alan's latest update buzzed on my phone. Alan, she's meeting him again today. Same coffee shop, 3 p.m. I stared at the message, my chest tightening. This was it. I left work early, making an excuse about a headache. The thought of seeing Amanda with him made my stomach churn, but I needed to know. I parked a block away from the coffee shop, my hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. Through the window, I could see Amanda sitting at a corner table, her posture relaxed, a faint smile on her lips. She wasn't alone. David Marcus sat across from her, leaning forward as he spoke. He gestured animatedly with his hands, his expression warm and familiar. Amanda laughed, her hand briefly touching his arm before pulling back. The sight sent a surge of anger through me, hot and unrelenting. I wanted to storm in to demand answers, but I forced myself to stay put. Alan had been right. I needed the whole picture before I made my move. As I watched, Amanda's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, her smile faltering for a moment before she quickly dismissed the notification. It wasn't the first time I'd seen that flicker of discomfort. What was she hiding? The meeting ended after about an hour. Amanda stood, tucking her phone in her bag as she said something to David. He nodded, his hand briefly touching her back as they walked out together. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. That evening, Amanda greeted me with her usual warmth, her expression as open and cheerful as ever. "Hey," she said, wrapping her arms around me. "How was your day?" "Fine," I replied, forcing a smile. She pulled back, studying me with a slight frown. "You seem tense." "Just a lot on my mind," I said, brushing past her into the living room. After dinner, I couldn't hold back anymore. "I saw you today," I said abruptly, my voice sharper than I intended. Amanda froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. "What do you mean?" "At the coffee shop," I said, my eyes locking onto hers. "I saw you with him." Her face drained of color, and for a moment, she looked like she might deny it. But then she sighed, setting her fork down. "It's not what you think," she said quietly. "Then tell me what it is," I demanded. She hesitated, her hands twisting in her lap. "David is a client. He's going through a divorce, and I've been helping him plan an event for his kids. That's all it is." Her explanation was plausible, but her tone wasn't convincing. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice tight. "Because I knew how it would look," she admitted. "I didn't want you to get the wrong idea." Her words did little to soothe my anger. "You've been lying to me for weeks," I said. "How am I supposed to believe you now?" Amanda's eyes filled with tears. "Jason, I swear, there's nothing going on. He's just a client." Her voice cracked, and for a moment, I almost believed her. But then I remembered the text. "Can't wait to see you again." Her lies were unraveling, and I wasn't going to stop until I had the full truth. The house was silent that night, the air thick with unspoken words. Amanda had retreated to the guest room, her tears fresh in my mind as I paced the living room. Her explanation about David sounded plausible on the surface, but it didn't hold up under scrutiny. A client? That might explain one meeting. But multiple coffee shop visits? The text? No. She was lying. The next morning, Amanda tried to act as though nothing had happened. She poured me a cup of coffee, her smile tentative but persistent. "Good morning," she said softly, setting the mug in front of me. "Morning," I replied curtly, barely looking at her. Her smile faltered, but she didn't press. Instead, she busied herself in the kitchen, her movements stiff and robotic. At work, I couldn't focus. My mind kept replaying the scene at the coffee shop, the way Amanda had laughed with David, the way her hand had lingered on his arm. It wasn't innocent. When my phone buzzed with a message from Alan, I nearly dropped it in my rush to read it. "Alan, she's meeting him again today. 2 p.m. Same place." I left the office without bothering to make an excuse. The drive to the coffee shop was a blur, my grip on the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. I parked across the street, my heart pounding as I spotted them through the window. Amanda and David were sitting at the same table as before, their heads close together as they spoke. This time I couldn't stay in the car. I pushed open the door, the bell above jingling loudly. Amanda looked up, her smile freezing on her face as her eyes met mine. "Jason," she said, her voice trembling. David turned, his expression wary. He didn't look guilty, just surprised. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded, my voice echoing through the small shop. Amanda stood quickly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Jason, this isn't what it looks like," she said, holding up her hands. "Then explain it." I snapped, my gaze shifting between her and David. David stood as well, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Mr. Carter, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Don't," I interrupted, pointing a finger at him. "Don't you dare talk to me." The coffee shop had gone quiet, all eyes on us. Amanda reached for my arm, her touch light but insistent. "Jason, please," she said, her voice low. "Let's talk about this somewhere else." "No," I said firmly, pulling my arm away. "We're talking about it now." David cleared his throat. "I should go." "Yeah," I said coldly, glaring at him. "You should." He hesitated, glancing at Amanda before walking toward the door. As soon as he was gone, I turned back to Amanda. "Start talking," I said, my voice hard. "And don't lie to me again." Amanda's face crumpled, her eyes brimming with tears. "I told you he's a client," she said, her voice breaking. "I've been helping him with an event, and he needed advice about his divorce. That's all." Her explanation sounded rehearsed, and the anger bubbling inside me threatened to boil over. "Do you think I'm stupid?" I asked, my voice rising. I've seen the way you look at him, Amanda. I've seen the texts. Do you want to try explaining those? Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. That's what I thought, I said bitterly. She reached for me again, her tears spilling over. Jason, please. You have to believe me. But I didn't. That night I called Alan. She's lying, I said, pacing the living room. I don't know how, but she's lying. I'm not surprised, Alan said. There's something else you should know. What? I asked, stopping in my tracks. I dug deeper into David Marcus, he said. And I found a connection I didn't expect. My stomach dropped. What kind of connection? Alan's pause was too long. He knows Ryan, he said finally. They've worked together for years. The room spun, the floor seeming to drop out from under me. Ryan? My best friend? The puzzle pieces started clicking into place, forming a picture I wasn't ready to see. Keep digging, I said, my voice cold. I need to know everything. Ryan. The name echoed in my mind as I sat in the darkened living room, staring at the floor. My best friend, my confidant, was somehow connected to the man Amanda had been meeting. It didn't make sense. Ryan had been by my side through everything. He called to check in after the robbery, offered advice when I was spiraling, even encouraged me to hire Alan. But now, I wasn't sure if I could trust him at all. The next day, I called Alan. Did you find anything else on Ryan? I asked, my voice tight. A little, Alan replied. He and David worked on a financial consulting project together about 6 months ago. They seemed to be on good terms, emails, calls, even a few meetings at Ryan's office. And Amanda? I asked. I'm still piecing it together, Alan said. But there's a pattern. Every time Amanda met with David, there was some kind of communication between David and Ryan not long before or after. The pieces were falling into place, and I hated the picture they were forming. That evening, Ryan called, his voice as upbeat as ever. Hey man, he said. What's going on? I hesitated, gripping the phone tightly. Not much. Just trying to sort some things out. Well, if you need to talk, I'm here, Ryan said, his tone warm. You seem a little off lately. Everything okay? I wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but I held back. Yeah, I said instead, forcing a laugh. Just work stuff. You know how it is. Of course, Ryan said easily. Let me know if you want to grab a drink and blow off some steam. After we hung up, I sat in the kitchen, the silence of the house pressing down on me. Amanda was upstairs, the faint sound of her voice carrying through the halls as she talked on the phone. I couldn't take it anymore. I climbed the stairs slowly, the sound of Amanda's laughter growing clearer. She was sitting on the bed, her back to the door, her phone pressed to her ear. No, I can't do that, she said, her tone light but firm. It's too risky. My chest tightened. Look, I'll figure it out, she continued. Just trust me, okay? She laughed again, a sound that used to make my heart swell. Now it made my stomach churn. I stepped into the room, and she turned, her smile freezing when she saw me. I'll call you back, she said quickly, ending the call and setting her phone on the nightstand. Who was that? I asked, crossing my arms. Just a co-worker, she said, her voice steady. Which co-worker? I pressed, my eyes narrowing. Amanda hesitated for a fraction of a second before replying. Maya, we're finalizing the details for an event next week. It was a good lie, quick, believable, but I didn't believe her. That night, after Amanda had fallen asleep, I went back to Alan. I need more on Ryan, I said. Every detail, every connection to Amanda, David, everything. Alan didn't hesitate. You've got it. The following morning, Amanda left early for a client meeting. I didn't bother asking for details. I already knew she wouldn't tell me the truth. Alan's call came just after noon. I've got something, he said, his tone serious. Tell me, I said, gripping the phone. I've been tracking Ryan's movements for the past couple of days, he said. He met with David last night, at the bar downtown. My stomach twisted. And they didn't stay long, but they looked tense, Alan said. And here's the kicker. Amanda called Ryan right after he left. The room spun as Alan's words sank in. Ryan wasn't just connected to David. He was connected to Amanda. My best friend. My wife. And they were keeping secrets together. Keep following them, I said, my voice cold. I don't care what it takes. I want to know everything. Alan agreed, and as I hung up the phone, a new kind of anger settled over me. This wasn't just about Amanda anymore. This was about Ryan, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Alan's revelation about Ryan shook me to my core. I trusted him with everything, with my fears, my doubts, even my marriage. And now, the idea that he might have betrayed me alongside Amanda and David felt like a knife twisting in my gut. But I wasn't going to let them blindside me again. That evening, Amanda was uncharacteristically quiet. She sat on the couch, her legs tucked beneath her, as she scrolled through her phone. Normally, she'd make small talk, ask about my day, or at least acknowledge me when I walked into the room. Tonight, though, she didn't even look up. "What's on your mind?" I asked, breaking the silence. She startled slightly, glancing at me with a forced smile. "Nothing. Just tired." Her response was automatic, devoid of any real emotion. "Busy day with Maya?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. "Yeah," she said quickly, nodding. "Non-stop meetings." Another lie. The tension between us was suffocating. Amanda retreated upstairs early, claiming she needed to prep for another client meeting the next day. I stayed in the living room, staring at my phone, waiting for Alan's update. It came just after midnight. "Alan, Ryan and David met again tonight. Bar downtown. Looked tense." I stared at the message, my chest tightening. "Jason, did Amanda call him again?" "Alan, not this time. But there's something else." My pulse quickened as I typed back. "Jason, what?" "Alan, I followed Ryan after the bar. He drove to your house." The room seemed to tilt as I reread the message, disbelief washing over me. "Jason, are you sure?" An 100%. He parked a block away and stayed in his car for 20 minutes before leaving. I gritted my teeth, my hands shaking with anger. What the hell was Ryan doing outside my house? The next morning, Amanda was already gone by the time I woke up. Her absence was almost a relief. I didn't trust myself to face her without snapping. Alan called as I was making coffee, his tone brisk. "I've been digging deeper into Ryan," he said, "and I found something you need to see." "What is it?" I asked, gripping the phone tightly. "There's a paper trail," Alan said. "Payments from Ryan to David over the past few months. Nothing huge, but enough to raise questions." "Payments for what?" I asked, my stomach sinking. "That's the thing," Alan said. "There's no clear explanation, but I think they're connected to Amanda." I drove to Ryan's office that afternoon, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. By the time I arrived, my anger had reached a boiling point. I walked into the building, my heart pounding as I approached the receptionist. "I'm here to see Ryan," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. She gave me a polite smile. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, my tone sharp. "But he'll want to see me." Ryan was seated at his desk when I stormed into his office. He looked up, startled, his usual confident demeanor faltering for just a moment. "Jason," he said, standing. "What's going on?" "You tell me," I said, slamming the door behind me. Ryan frowned, his brow furrowing in confusion. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb," I snapped. "I know about the payments. I know about the meetings with David. And I know you've been sneaking around my house." Ryan's face paled, and for a moment, he looked genuinely afraid. But then he straightened, his expression hardening. "Jason, you've got it all wrong," he said, his voice firm. "Doi." I shot back. "Then explain it to me. Why are you paying David? Why were you outside my house last night?" Ryan hesitated, his jaw tightening. "It's not what you think," he said finally. "Then tell me what it is," I demanded, my voice rising. He took a deep breath, his shoulders slumping slightly. "David, he's been blackmailing me," Ryan admitted, his voice low. The words hit me like a punch. "Blackmailing you for what?" I asked, my stomach twisting. "For money," Ryan said. "He found out something about me. Something personal. He's been threatening to tell people if I don't pay him off." His explanation sounded plausible, but it didn't feel complete. "And Amanda?" I pressed. "Where does she fit into this?" Ryan shook his head. "She doesn't." I swear. I didn't believe him. When I left Ryan's office, my anger hadn't subsided. If anything, it had only grown. Ryan's confession raised more questions than it answered, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. I called Alan as I drove home. "Keep watching them," I said. "Ryan, David, Amanda, all of them. I want every detail." Alan agreed, and as I hung up the phone, a single thought burned in my mind. The truth was closing in, and I was ready for it. I drove home in a haze, Alan's words replaying in my mind. Ryan was being blackmailed. At least that's what he claimed. But if that was true, Why was Amanda meeting David too? The pieces didn't fit, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for the picture they would create when they did. Amanda was already home when I arrived, sitting at the dining table with her laptop open. She looked up as I walked in, her expression cautious. "Hey," she said softly. "How was your day?" "Long," I replied, setting my keys on the counter. She nodded, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Dinner will be ready soon. I thought we could talk afterward." "Talk about what?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. Amanda hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. "About us. About what's been going on." Her words sent a chill through me, but I kept my face neutral. "All right," I said. "Let's talk." After dinner, we sat across from each other at the table, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. "I know you've been feeling distant," Amanda began, her voice trembling. "And I know it's my fault, but I need you to understand that I never meant to hurt you." "Then why the lies?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Why the secret meetings with David? Why the text messages you won't explain?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "David is someone I thought I could trust," she said slowly. "But I was wrong." "What does that mean?" I demanded. Before she could answer, my phone buzzed on the table. I glanced at the screen. It was Alan. "Who is it?" Amanda asked, her voice wary. "Work," I lied, standing and walking into the other room to take the call. "Jason," Alan said, his voice urgent. "I've got something. You need to hear this." "Go ahead," I said, my pulse quickening. "Ryan's lying to you," Alan said bluntly. "He's not being blackmailed by David. They've been working together, meeting regularly to coordinate something involving Amanda." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm saying Ryan and David are in on this together," Alan said. "And Amanda's caught in the middle." I ended the call and returned to the dining room, my mind racing. Amanda looked up at me, her expression a mixture of fear and guilt. "What is it?" she asked. "Tell me the truth, Amanda," I said, my voice low. "No more lies." Her eyes widened, and for a moment I thought she might deny everything. But then her shoulders slumped, and she buried her face in her hands. "It's Ryan," she said, her voice muffled. "He's the one who brought David into this." The words hit me like a punch. "Brought him into what?" I asked, my anger bubbling over. Amanda looked up, tears streaming down her face. "He wanted to hurt you," she said, her voice trembling. "He said you didn't deserve everything you had. Your job, your friends, even me. He convinced David to blackmail you, to steal from you, to what?" I demanded, my fists clenching. "To destroy you," she whispered. The room spun as her words sank in. Ryan, my best friend, had orchestrated everything. The robbery, the lies, the meetings with David. It had all been part of his plan. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I was scared," Amanda said, sobbing. "Ryan said he'd ruin both of us if I told you. I thought I could handle it, that I could make it stop, but it just kept getting worse." Her confession filled me with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "Do you still love him?" I asked, my voice raw. Her eyes widened in horror. "No, Jason, I love you. I've always loved you. I was just trying to protect you." I stood there for a long moment, the weight of her words pressing down on me. "Ryan's going to pay for this," I said finally, my voice cold. Amanda nodded, her expression resolute. "Whatever you need me to do, I'll do it." The next day, I met Alan to plan my next move. With his help, I gathered enough evidence to confront Ryan and David, and to take them down for good. When it was over, I walked away from the wreckage of my friendship with Ryan and the lies that had nearly destroyed my marriage. Amanda and I weren't the same, but we were determined to rebuild. Together.